of understanding, yeah, and a lack of appreciation of this body of rules, this body of laws, which should be used to help create a more just, more fair, happier society.
Thank you. Thank you, Azmi. Now, all three of you have actually said we don't need a Race Relations Act, or we shouldn't have one. Now, Shah, I'm going to put this question to you. In an article written by J.S. and Anthony, I don't know if he's here this morning, but it was a very interesting article. He's in the Law Reform Committee of the Bar Council. He actually argues for a Race Relations Act, quite unlike what you have said. Now, I'm going to quote this to you, and I'm going to ask you whether you're prepared to change your mind as to whether we should have a Race Relations Act. He says this: "It cannot be denied that the improper and arbitrary application of affirmative action policies, as provided under Article 153, has contributed significantly to the deteriorating race relations in Malaysia, as it has led to reverse discrimination. The deprivation of equal opportunities," he says, has caused racial tensions to run high in recent years. Therefore, in order to improve these race relations, he says, there must be legislative intervention. So in other words, what he's saying is, not the criminalizing part, which is what you distinguish the two, criminalizing, enabling. Would it not be a good idea to have the Race Relations Act to actually moderate Article 153 and to actually set down the standards that should be applied in relation to Article 153?
I know I'm not prepared to change my stand. Because, again, I go back to what I said earlier. You can have all the laws in the world. You can have all the regulations, but if at the end of the day, your mindset is still the same, if the implementation of these laws still remain the same, and the people who are implementing these laws still have the same mindset, it's not going to make any difference. So you can enact these laws, to try to say that, okay, we have to give equal opportunities and all that. But what we're doing is just taking the law and shoving it down people's throat. You say we need to have equal opportunity, but where is the thought process to reach that? Why are we having these laws? Do we say that, oh, we have a problem? Can we agree that first we have a problem with discrimination? And where does that problem lie? Does it lie across the board, or does it lie in government institutions, but not in private institutions? We must first try to understand that first, and then we try and fix the problem. And fixing the problem to me is, more laws will not fix the problem. The problem first must come by, the fixing of the problem must come through us first.
Okay, let me take you up further on that, Shah. Now, what the author argues, and what I think as well, is that we have overt, that the law should be a standard setter. It should set the standard, okay? And what we have is inequality in the public service, percentages of people who are involved in the government civil service. You have it in the army, you have it in the police, etc., etc. Wouldn't a positive affirmative type policy which says that certain percentages ought to be there in these various sectors, isn't that helpful?
I think at this point in time, the problem is not that people, they are actually discriminated. I think the problem is that they do not want to join the service. I think that's one of the main problems. I think the main reason is probably the perception, whether justified or not, that perhaps when you join these services, there's a glass ceiling. There's a glass ceiling. You cannot go up any higher. I mean, can we see later on a Chief Justice which is not Malay, for example? I think the perception is there, whether it's justified or not. So I don't think that by saying, okay, we need to have laws to say that, oh, a certain percentage must be given so that to ensure that there's proportionality. I don't think that is going to fix the problem at all. Because if at the end of the day, if people have the perception that regardless, okay, I can enter, okay, I'm going to enter it because there's 30% or how many percent quota for non-Malays in the civil service. But if the perception is that, okay, I'm in there, but at a certain level, I'm going to reach a glass ceiling, I'm not going to go up any higher, what's the point? Okay, if we are prepared to say that, no, we're going to break all these barriers, regardless of who you are, if you are talented, if you fit the bill, you can go up as high as the AGs, the CJ, even a director in one of the kementerians. Even that, I mean, if we are prepared to say that no, there's no more those kind of racism or rather racial discrimination, then perhaps that would be useful. But if you're just going to, at entry level, you say that, okay, we need 30%, 20% non-Malays in the service because we want it to be proportionate, that's not going to solve the problem in my opinion.
Faisal, you have said that you don't think there is any overt racism. Are you saying that we don't have a problem in Malaysia?
I think that's the toughest question so far.
Yes.
I think we do have a problem, but I don't think the problem is one of racism. I think the problem is more of, this is the reason why I asked earlier, when you look at the person next to you, do you really hate that person because of the race? You don't. We don't. But because how certain policies are shaped, because how certain policies are perceived, that is why we have a problem in terms of perception. That we are not all getting, the fair end of the bargain here. And so, problem, yes. Racism, I don't think so.
All right, let me push you a little bit further on that one. Now, you do admit that racism is institutionalized in this country. It's there it is there. Would you agree with that? And I will also follow up by saying, is it time we disbanded race-based parties? I mean, isn't it time we did that? Isn't that a cause? Isn't that one of the main causes for racism in this country?
Oh yes, can I just go back a little bit? Funny, Dato, you should ask about institutionalized racism in terms of Malaysia and the political parties here. But you see, just drawing back from the UK experience, the main cause, for example, of why we don't see, just going back a little bit, participation in the private sector or whatnot, is because, like Shah said, is a perception. And this is what was found by the Macpherson study when they conducted it in 1998, prior to the 2000 RRA amendment. Now, that is perpetuated because we all want to have our interests safeguarded along racial lines. I mean, let's be honest. Most of us are not prepared to say that we should not be first identified with our ethnicity, or to have the interests of our ethnic protected over the larger national interests. But to answer Dato's question, yeah, I think political institution is one of the problem, where you have political parties which are race-based, and we should be moving to a more all-inclusive political parties. But political parties are actually, and membership in these political parties are actually made up of us, Malaysians. So parties don't just exist. We subscribe to their ideology. Why do we subscribe to their ideology? So that's the biggest issue. So this kind of parties continues to exist because we prop them up.
Okay, I'm going to throw open the question to all of you. Really, the problem is, isn't it our politicians? Shouldn't they be setting the standard? I mean, you say that we must all change and stuff like that. Look, we don't fight with each other. But what's happening out there in the press almost on a daily basis, and I talk about all press, is that the politicians are taking stands that are creating racist emotions. So what do you all have to say about that? Azmi.
Yeah, all right. Notice how the politician this morning said Salam Satu Malaysia. It makes me cringe. Every time they say Salam Satu Malaysia, it's not a salam, I don't know what it is. And I also like the way he said that he's Chinese first and Malaysian first. And I would say that I am neither. I'm Azmi first. All right? Because I'm suspicious of overt patriotism as well. So it's you're a human being, and I think you should behave as well as a human being should behave. And that's it. Now, with regards to your questions, who's doing the standard setting? No one's doing the standard setting. And that's the problem. I mean, and it goes further than that. If you look at, say, our educational system, all right, I dare you to go to MPH or to Popular and just pick out the Form 4, Form 5 history textbook. Have a look at the Form 4, Form 5 history textbook and tell me it's not racist. Tell me the tone, the tenor of the education of our young people is not racist. So how on earth are you going to fix it where right from school, all right, this whole idea, engkau kaum pendatang and you didn't do very much really for the country, is already ingrained in our young people's heads. So yeah, you're talking about leadership. I don't see any. Not yet lah. Who knows? Maybe in a few months.
Shah, would you like to comment on that?
We have really got to stop idealizing politicians. Really. I think this country, as compared to any other countries, we hold politicians to such a high regard. They come to us. Did you see this photo of this politician kissing another politician's hand? Okay. Did you see that? I mean, the regard that we have, as if these politicians are divine. And then we look to them for leadership? Really? We need to stop and bring them back to the level where they belong, with us. Okay? So once we stop looking at them for leadership, once we start looking at ourselves to be the leaders, then I think we can start doing things. Because too much reliance is placed on these politicians. They are looked upon as problem solvers, gift from God. Some of them, You have a problem with your longkang, you go and find a politician. When actually you should find your MPBJ or DBKL. Okay. You have a problem, your son cannot get into some university, you go to politicians. Okay. Your boyfriend beats you up, you go to politicians. Everything. It seems that politicians is the conduit of everything in this country. That if you don't go to politicians, then your problem is not going to be solved. Okay? I think we need to break that. I think we need to empower ourselves first. When we have a problem, the first thing that should come to mind, if you have a clogged drain, the first thing should come to mind is not your Don or your MP. Call up MPBJ. I see on Twitter, for example, some people tweeting, YB, the traffic light in this one is not working. Look lah, he is supposed to go into the parliament and debate national issues. Not whether your traffic light is not working. Really. Yeah, well then they don't do much debate over there. So, but that's the thing. So we need to empower ourselves to look at ourselves, that we can solve these problems first. And then if we cannot, then perhaps we need them to bring it up in parliament. But that's all.
Faisal, do you want to?
Actually, I've been waiting to say this at the forum. I think now would be best as good a time as any. Just picking up from what Shah said, not idealizing politicians. Could I also add that we should apply the same yardstick for every type of politician out there? I mean, be it BN or Pakatan Rakyat, because we tend to do this, right? We tend to create this enemy. So no matter what the enemy does, And I'm talking, I mean, for BN supporters, it could be Pakatan Rakyat. For Pakatan Rakyat supporters, it could be BN. So no matter what the enemy does, is always wrong. No matter what your idol does, be it PR or BN, is always right. Because if you listen to your politicians carefully, I don't know whether Richard Wee will allow me to say dumb, but by and large, they are just playing to the gallery. They play to your emotions. They say things that you want to hear, so that you will give them your vote next time. So now, if you know that's the case, can you flip the table, please? Can you really let them know what you want to hear from them? Alright, so if we move our shift, if we move our focus, if we move our paradigm, the politicians who are relying on us for votes will have to follow suit. So I suppose really change does start with us.
But taking up that point, Faisal, don't you, so wouldn't you agree with me that these politicians who are saying things for votes are the ones who are creating the racial problems in this country? Racism is a political issue, and they use it to get votes.
Well, then again, Dato, this is going to be like chicken and egg here, because they are saying those things because they think we want to hear it. They think the Malays want to hear, oh, saya akan jamin kamu punya kerakyatan sini, negara kamu. You know, or they probably think the Indians say, oh, we will give you the equal right. I mean, of course, the Indian and the Chinese deserve it. We are all, you know, equal Malaysian citizens. We all have the same stake in the country, the same rights in the country. But I don't think I would want to blame the politicians, because the politician does not exist without us. You know, so they are saying the things they are saying because there are people who are actually propping up and supporting and lapping up everything that they say. If we really change our tech, we really change our tune, we change our mindset, they will have to adapt to us. We don't have to adapt to them.
So we should not vote for any MP who is racist or espouses racist type sentiments.
I mean, that's a given.
Thank you. It's not necessarily a given with all, but yeah. Okay, let's move on. Now, Azmi mentioned the... Sorry, Faisal, I haven't finished, sorry. I just want to... Because you didn't comment just now. On this education system, I mean, I think it's very worrying. In fact, I had a teacher saying to me that what we are doing to our children in schools is criminal, actually, because we are feeding them with such rubbish. Now, you know of the case, for example, where headmistress and headmaster, I can't remember, but headmaster, I think, where he was derogatory about Indian students wearing prayer beads. Do you remember that incident a couple of years ago?
Was this in Johor?
Yes. And then one of them saying that Chinese should return, etc. Now these are headmaster, headmistress, okay? Very, very serious, because they are the ones who are setting the standard in the schools. So clearly, should our education system be left to our politicians, who don't know much about education, or should it be left to people who know what education is about and who are going to, yes?
Well, we definitely need a government of technocrats. Let's put it that way. We don't need a government of politicians. We need people who have mastery and skill in certain areas to be involved in those areas. And those people are actually us. So again, it comes back to the question, what do we want to do about it? Because you leave it to the politicians. Again, like Dato, you said, they are really not a specialist of anything. But it's okay, we can still have the existing system, but the only way to improve it is to have more consultation. And if they don't know it, they can always ask, and there will be people who knows how to go about it. Now, it's no surprise that the headmaster or whatever, headmaster or headmistress, I think this happened in Johor, said what he or she did, because that's from the textbook that they have been teaching the kids. So it's sort of ingrained in people who are in the system. It's ingrained. So we need to get them out of the system. You know, we cannot accept this as a given. You know?
We have to educate our educators.
Yes, we have to educate
our educators have to be educated. Either one. Now,
sorry,
yeah,
sorry.
go on.
I mean, like, the thing is, I mean, ideally, yeah. I mean, I would agree with Faisal. A lot of the things like textbooks and stuff like that, it should be dealt with by educationists. All right, and these educationists should be working in the Ministry of Education. They should be specialists in their fields, and they should be concerned about education as an ideal. All right, but believe me, I've met some of these technocrats, and it's frightening. These technocrats, because I'm in the business as well, and you can't believe what's coming out of their mouths. We have a problem which is not just about the politicians. We have a problem about quality all the way down, right? Where they are working, the people who are surrounding them. By and large, a lot of these technocrats are so used to having one leader that all they do is try to ampubodet that leader. And without thinking, oh look, I'm a civil servant. I'm separate from the blinking political party. I have my job to do, and it is separate from your job as a politician. All right, and there will be times when your government might make policy which might affect me, but by and large, I'm a separate entity. They don't see that. You see, they don't see that, and that's the danger, and that's the problem, because there's no check and balance within governance, which automatically should be there, because a civil servant should have their own sets of values and their own duties.
Don't put away the mic, Azmi. I want to ask you your comment on the BTN, the Biro Tata Negara, because there are allegations that the scandals that emerge from there are so huge, that it is really a strategic propaganda that encourages racism.
Yes, it is. Unfortunately, I've never been invited to go to this BTN program. I don't know why, but they seem to have rejected me right from the start. Because, I work in UM. I would have thought I would be prime candidate to be put in some hutan somewhere and be told, things which I should know, because, I meld young minds. You got to fix me. Before you let me loose. But for some strange reason, I've never been. I would think it would be wonderful. I would hate it, but I would make them hate it even more. So yeah, of course, I've heard. I know of people who have got on BTN things, and it is as obnoxious as it sounds.
Yeah. Thank you, Azmi. Did you want to comment, Shah? Shah, I'm going to ask you this question now. Next question, which is, did you suggest that we have enough laws to deal with the issue of racism? And my follow-up to that is, isn't it the bar stand, one of them is the Sedition Act, apart from the Penal Code, it's the Sedition Act. Isn't it the bar stand that the Sedition Act should be abolished entirely because it is such an oppressive piece of legislation, and that really we shouldn't be arguing that the Sedition Act can be used to curb racism?
I think my argument is that whilst you may say you have enough, so I think I said you have laws to regulate this, but my argument is more towards that you can have all the laws in the world, but if you don't change, it's not really enough. But yes, the Sedition Act, even I think President just now mentioned that the Sedition Act, and also notwithstanding the fact that the Malaysian Bar's position is that it should be abolished entirely. Of course, apart from that, I think there are also laws which might not be specifically enacted to deal with racism per se or racial vilification. But if we so feel a need that we need to put this law in, then perhaps you can just amend the penal code, the part about inciting religious hatred and all that. Perhaps include in that something to say that religious and racial hatred. If you really think that we need to do that.
Faisal, you argued that if you say you're Malaysian somehow, if I understand you correctly, you're giving up your individual identity. Is that true? Is it a contradiction in terms? Why can't it be both?
Well, because the logical conclusion of any race relation act is equality. Now, equality means everybody is the same. Now this we have seen this model happening in UK. We have seen this model happening in Netherlands. Now you may think that everybody is the same. It's actually a good thing, but it is not. Our diversity is actually what makes us what makes us interesting. But in promoting that diversity, certain policies may have been made by the government or the government of the day, which seems to you know, lodge a wedge between us. But when in effect, it is more important for us to recognize we can still remain who we are without having a, let's say, like a national identity like the British is craving for, Britishness, for example. We can remain who we are, but yet remain a nation.
So what about one Malaysia? Do you agree? You don't agree with it?
I don't think we need to. You see, sometimes when you start saying one Malaysia, you realize there is a problem. There are many Malaysia right now. But for me, honestly for me, and I'm a BN sympathizer, I will just put it out right here. For me, I think that is really a rhetoric, one Malaysia. It's an aspiration trying to see that whether or not we can identify ourselves as one nation. But you want to achieve that, it doesn't mean that we have to give away our ethnic identities. What it means is that we come up with better policies that will promote multiculturalism in a way that we don't get upset with other races or ethnicity. So I think it boils down to the question of policy. It doesn't boil down to the question of race at all.
Azmi, do you agree with Faisal that if we are equal, we're the same?
Well, you know, yeah. Well, I think that sameness is you can never be the same, okay? And you can never truly ever be treated 100% equally either. All right? You cannot use a disabled toilet, or you shouldn't be allowed to use a disabled toilet. All right? So, you know, as an idea of both, you know, there's really in reality there isn't such a thing. But I think what ultimately what I was talking about is that even when there are differences, we must be convinced and we must be satisfied that the treatment is ultimately fair. It could be different, but it could still be fair, and that's what we're missing out here. And with regards to the idea of Britishness, for example, yeah, I mean, of course, the idea of anythingness is a little bit uncomfortable because you know we're so different. You know, I mean, you know, I don't want to be the same with Ibrahim Ali. You know, I mean, you know, it will freak me out. You know, it's very, you know, it's glee. You know, but I do believe that there must be some sort of understanding. It would be good, yeah, if we did have an underlying ethos, a national ethos. Not necessarily sameness, but just certain basic principles. Like, for example, if we truly believe that everybody belongs here, you know, and that those who don't believe that everybody belongs here is a tiny nutcase minority, and there will always be tiny nutcase minorities. Yeah. Squad Picasso. But you know, so let's you know, so there are certain values which I think would be nice if we generally have, but to say a homogeneous Malaysianness or homogeneous Britishness, I think it would lead to a very dull life, very dull and boring life indeed.
Yeah.
For the first time, I'm going to disagree with I don't.
First time?
Openly disagree. I don't think it's a tiny minority of people who actually think that there are people in this country who don't belong in this country. I think that it is a sizable, I don't know whether it's majority, but it's a sizable number, and we cannot disregard it. I go back to the fact that I said that we are deeply divided. Remember the murder